You people can't even mop properly." The words sliced through the boardroom like a blade. Ethan Cole froze coffee dripping from Clara Stratton's designer suit onto the marble floor he'd spent an hour polishing. In that moment, the CEO of Stratton Industries branded him invisible, worthless beneath her world. But 12 hours later, when her luxury SUV wrapped around a guardrail in a storm, flames licking at the windows, only one pair of headlights stopped. Only one man pulled her from death, the janitor she'd just humiliated. Before we begin, I want to invite you to stay with me until the very end of this story. It's a journey about dignity, redemption, and the unexpected places where grace finds us. And please comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The alarm screamed at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before Ethan had set it. He'd been awake anyway, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a bird in flight. His hand shot out, silencing the phone before it could wake Emily in the next room. The apartment was cold. The landlord had promised to fix the heating 2 weeks ago, but promises from landlords were like morning fog, gone when you needed them most. Ethan sat up, his back protesting. 36 years old, and his body already kept a ledger of every mistake, every heavy lift, every night sleeping in positions that made room for a growing daughter in a bed too small for both of them. He rubbed his face, feeling the stubble he'd shave in the bathroom at work to save water at home, and stood. The kitchen was a strip of cracked linoleum barely wide enough for one person. He filled the coffee maker with yesterday's grounds, adding 2 fresh spoonfuls on top. Waste not. The machine gurgled to life, and while it worked, he moved to Emily's door, pushing it open just enough to see her small form buried under 2 blankets and his old Marine's jacket. 8 years old. 8 years of being both mother and father, both provider and comforter, both disciplinarian and best friend. She stirred, sensing him even in sleep. "Daddy." "Shh, baby, still early. Go back to sleep." "You leaving?" "Just for a bit. Mrs. Chen's coming at 7 to take you to school." "I can walk myself. I'm not a baby." "I know you're not, but humor your old man." "Okay." She mumbled something that might have been agreement and burrowed deeper. Ethan watched her for another moment, then quietly closed the door. The coffee was ready. He poured it into a thermos that had traveled with him from Kandahar to Chicago to this cramped apartment on the south side, and checked his watch. 5:03 a.m. If he left now, he'd make the 5:15 bus transfer at Roosevelt and clock in at Stratton Industries by 6:30. 30 minutes to spare before the first executives arrived. The morning was brutal, wind cutting through his jacket like it wasn't there. The bus stop was empty except for a woman he recognized, a nurse finishing her night shift at County. They nodded at each other, members of an unspoken club, the people who moved through the city while it slept. On the bus, Ethan closed his eyes, but didn't sleep. He thought about Emily's parent-teacher conference next week, the way Mrs. Patterson had looked at him last time, sympathy and pity mixing in her eyes, when she'd suggested Emily might benefit from after-school programs, not saying, but implying that a single father working nights couldn't provide what a child needed. He'd smiled, thanked her, and felt something inside him crack a little more. The transfer was quick. By 6:23, he was scanning his badge at Stratton Industries, a gleaming tower of steel and glass that housed 5,000 employees and dreams of technological revolution. Ethan Cole was not one of those employees. He was part of the infrastructure, invisible as the wiring in the walls. "Morning, Ethan." Marcus, the night shift supervisor, looked up from his clipboard. "Floors 8 through 12 need a full scrub. There's a board meeting on 12 today. Big one. The CEO's evaluating new acquisitions." "Got it." "And Ethan, be extra careful today. Ms. Stratton's already been in since 5. She's in a mood." Ethan nodded. Clara Stratton was always in a mood. In the 2 years he'd worked here, he'd seen her exactly 7 times, and each time she'd looked through him like he was made of air. It didn't bother him anymore. People like her lived in a different world, one where people like him existed only to maintain the stage. He gathered his supplies, a yellow cart, loaded with mops, buckets, cleaning solutions, and pushed toward the service elevator. The building was waking up. Lights flickered on floor by floor. Security guards changed shifts. The early birds of middle management began arriving, clutching coffees and phones, already stressed about things Ethan would never understand. The 8th floor was easy, mostly empty offices. He moved through them methodically, the work meditative in its repetition. Spray, wipe, mop, repeat. His mind wandered. He needed to call the pediatrician about Emily's cough. He needed to talk to the landlord again about the heating. He needed to figure out how to afford new shoes for her, the ones with the lights she'd been eyeing at the discount store. By 8:45 he was on 12. The executive floor. Everything here was different, quieter, the carpet thicker, the air itself seeming more refined. The boardroom was at the end of the hall, massive glass doors revealing a table that could seat 30. Ethan had been told to save it for last, to make sure it was pristine. He started with the hallway, his mop making smooth arcs across the marble. The stone was imported from Italy, someone had once told him. It cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. He tried not to think about that. Voices approached. Ethan moved his cart closer to the wall, making room. A group of executives emerged from an office suits that cost thousands, watches that cost more. They flowed around him like water around a stone, not one of them making eye contact. He was used to it. Then came the click of heels, sharp and precise. He knew that sound. Everyone who worked here knew that sound. Clara Stratton walked like she owned the air itself. 38 years old, her dark hair pulled back severely, her suit a shade of gray that probably had a name like gunmetal or steel. She held a tablet in one hand, coffee in the other, and her assistant struggled to keep pace beside her, rattling off numbers and names and urgency. The Singapore deal closes at 2. Hong Kong wants a call at 4. Your mother called 3 times. I told her you'd call back. Tell her I'm in meetings all day. I told her that yesterday. Then she should expect the same answer today, Patricia. Ethan kept mopping eyes down, trying to be invisible. It usually worked. It didn't work today. Maybe it was the way the light hit the floor, making it more slippery than usual. Maybe it was the fact that Clara Stratton was reading her tablet instead of watching where she walked. Maybe it was just the universe's way of saying that today invisibility would not be granted. Her heel caught the edge of his mop bucket. Time did that thing it does in moments of disaster, slowing to a crawl. Ethan saw her stumble, saw the coffee arc from her hand in a perfect parabola, saw her face shift from concentration to shock to fury in the space of a heartbeat. The coffee hit her chest, soaking into that expensive gray suit, spreading like a stain on reputation itself. She regained her balance, but the damage was done. 20 feet away, the boardroom doors were open, and a dozen board members watched the CEO of their company dripping with coffee in the hallway. The silence was absolute. Ethan dropped his mop. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. Let me—" "Don't." Her voice could have frozen fire. She held up one hand, coffee dripping from her sleeve. Her eyes found his, and what he saw there wasn't just anger. It was something colder, something that measured him and found him wanting. "Don't touch me. I can help clean. You've helped enough." She turned to her assistant, who was frantically pulling napkins from her bag. "Patricia, get me a change of clothes. Now." "Yes, Ms. Stratton, right away." Clara looked back at Ethan and then at the board members watching from the doorway. When she spoke, her voice carried meant for them, meant for him, meant for everyone who needed to know where they stood in her world. "You people can't even mop properly." The words landed like stones. Ethan felt his jaw tighten, felt the heat rise into his chest, felt the instinct to respond, to defend, to push back against the casual cruelty. But he looked at those board members, at Patricia's sympathetic but helpless face, at Clara Stratton's designer shoes planted firmly on marble that cost more than he'd make in a year, and he swallowed it all. "I apologize, Ms. Stratton." His voice was steady, carefully neutral. "It won't happen again." She made a sound dismissive and turned away. As she walked toward the boardroom, he heard her say, just loud enough, "Men like that will never rise above the floor they clean." The board members filed back inside. Patricia mouthed, "Sorry," to him before following. The glass doors closed. Ethan stood in the hallway, mop in hand, coffee spreading across marble that would now need to be cleaned again. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, from the effort it took to keep everything locked inside. Marcus appeared from the elevator. "Hey man, you okay? I heard." "I'm fine. Listen, don't worry about it. These things happen. I'll talk to Marcus." Ethan looked at his supervisor, this good man who'd given him a chance when he needed one. "I need this job. I need it more than I need to be right, so I'm fine, okay." Marcus studied him, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but if anyone gives you trouble about this, they won't. People like her don't think about people like me long enough to give us trouble. We're just part of the scenery." He finished the floor in silence, working carefully around where the coffee had spilled, making sure every inch was perfect. When he was done, you couldn't tell anything had happened. That's what he was good at, making problems disappear, leaving no trace. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. He cleaned offices, emptied trash, scrubbed bathrooms. At 3:30, his phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen. "Emily, home safe. She ate all her vegetables. Wants to tell you about spelling test." He smiled at that, the first real smile since morning. Emily. His reason for swallowing pride, for accepting humiliation, for mopping floors and taking whatever the world threw at him. As long as she was safe, as long as she was happy, the rest didn't matter. At 4:00 p.m., Ethan clocked out. The sky was already darkening November, pressing down on the city. His car, a 15-year-old Honda that rattled when it hit 40, waited in the employee lot. He'd bought it for $800 3 years ago, and every month he prayed it would last just a little longer. It started on the second try. Thank you, he thought, to whatever deity watched over struggling fathers and dying Hondas. The drive home took him through downtown, past buildings, where people made in an hour what he made in a week. He tried not to think about it. Comparison was poison. He'd learned that in the Marines. Every man runs his own race. But today, with those words still echoing, men like that will never rise above the floor they clean. It was hard not to feel the weight of it, the truth in it. Because what was he doing? What was his plan? Clock in at 6:30 a.m., clock out at 4:00 p.m., go home to a daughter who deserved so much more than a father who smelled like industrial cleaner and could barely afford new shoes. He'd had plans once. After the Marines, after 2 tours, after he'd helped rebuild infrastructure in places where war had torn everything down, he'd had plans. Engineering school, a real career, a future. Then Sarah died. Emily was 3 months old, sudden cardiac arrest. No warning, no chance to prepare. One moment his wife was singing to their daughter, the next she was gone. And Ethan, 28 years old, with a purple heart and survivor's guilt and a baby who needed him, had made a choice. He'd put away the plans. He'd taken whatever work he could find. He'd become a father. The problem was 6 years later, he was still taking whatever work he could find. The apartment building looked worse in the failing light. Graffiti on the first floor, a broken window someone had covered with cardboard. Mrs. Chen was waiting on the stoop, her coat pulled tight. "Mr. Cole, Emily is wonderful today. Very good girl." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. How much do I owe you?" No, you already pay me for the week." "Mrs. Chen, you are good father, good man. This is enough." She patted his arm and shuffled toward the bus stop before he could argue. Ethan climbed the 3 flights to their apartment, each step familiar, each creak in the stairs, a note in a song he knew by heart. He opened the door. "Daddy." Emily launched herself at him, all energy and joy and the smell of Johnson's baby shampoo. He caught her, lifted her, buried his face in her hair. "Hey, princess, how was school?" "I got 100 on my spelling test." Mrs. Patterson said I was the only one who got every word right. That's my girl. I'm so proud of you. She pulled back, studying his face with those eyes that were too much like Sarah's. You look sad. I'm not sad. I'm tired. Big difference. Did something bad happen? He carried her to the couch, their one piece of furniture that wasn't secondhand. He'd saved for 6 months to buy it, wanting her to have one nice thing. Nothing bad, just a long day. Tell me. Nothing to tell Em, just work stuff. She settled against his chest, her fingers playing with his shirt collar. Was someone mean to you? Kids were too perceptive. He'd noticed it before, how she could read him better than anyone, how she picked up on moods and tensions he thought he was hiding. Sometimes, he said carefully, people have bad days, and they take it out on whoever's nearby. It's not personal. That's not fair. No, it's not, but that's life sometimes. If I was there, I would have told them to be nice. You're the nicest daddy in the whole world. His throat tightened. Well, I've got the best daughter in the whole world, so that makes sense. They sat like that for a while, his arms around her, her small heart beating against his chest. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to small apartments, and tired fathers and little girls who thought their dads were heroes. Daddy, yeah, are we poor? The question hit him like a punch. What makes you ask that? Jenny at school said we're poor because you work as a janitor and we don't have a car like hers. Ethan took a breath, choosing his words. We have what we need. I have a job. You have a home, food, clothes. We're not rich, but we're not poor either. We're in the middle, just like a lot of people. But you're so smart. Why don't you have a better job? Sometimes life doesn't work out the way we plan, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I get to come home to you every day. That makes me the richest man in the world. She seemed to accept this, or at least decided not to push. They made dinner together, pasta with jarred sauce and frozen vegetables, her standing on a chair to stir the pot while he grated cheese. They ate at the small table by the window, talking about her day, her friends, the book she was reading about a girl who discovered a magical garden. After dinner, homework, then a bath, then bedtime stories, 2 chapters of Matilda, her current favorite. When her eyes finally grew heavy, he tucked the blankets around her, kissed her forehead. Daddy, yeah, princess, today when I was praying, I asked God to help that mean person be nicer, because maybe they're just sad and don't know how to be happy. He looked at his daughter, this 8-year-old, who had more wisdom and grace than most adults he knew, and felt something break and heal simultaneously in his chest. You're a special kid, Emily Cole. I know, you tell me every day. She smiled, eyes closing, already drifting. He sat there for a moment, watching her sleep, this perfect thing he and Sarah had made, this reason for everything. In the living room, he opened his laptop, the screen flickering to life. He opened his email, mostly spam and bills, but there buried was one he'd saved, an application form for night classes at the community college. Engineering program. He'd filled it out 3 times over the past year, never hit send. He looked at it now, cursor hovering over the submit button. What was the point? He couldn't afford tuition. Couldn't afford the time. Couldn't afford the risk of failing when Emily depended on stability. Men like that will never rise above the floor they clean. He closed the laptop. At 10:00 p.m., exhausted but restless, Ethan made tea and stood at the window. Rain had started drops streaking the glass, the city blurred beyond. He thought about tomorrow, about facing that building again, about the possibility of seeing Clara Stratton and having to maintain that mask of professional servility. He thought about dignity and what it cost, and whether he had any left. His phone buzzed. A reminder, Emily's doctor appointment next week. Another expense, but necessary. Her cough hadn't improved. He finished his tea, rinsed the cup, checked the door locks, turned off the lights. In his bedroom, barely bigger than Emily's, he lay down in the darkness and stared at that water stain on the ceiling, the bird that never flew anywhere. Tomorrow would come early. 4:47 a.m. The alarm would scream. He would wake, make coffee, take the bus, clock and mop floors, and if he was lucky, remain invisible. That's what he told himself. He had no idea that in less than 12 hours everything would change. That the woman who'd humiliated him would need him in a way that no title, no money, no power could provide. That grace, when it finally came, would arrive in the form of twisted metal and flames, and a choice made in the rain without thinking, without hesitation, without keeping score. But for now, in the darkness of a cold apartment, Ethan Cole closed his eyes and hoped for sleep, unaware that fate was already in motion, already racing toward a moment on a rain-slicked highway where the janitor and the CEO would meet again, and this time only one of them would be in control. The rain started before his shift ended. Ethan heard it first on the high windows of the 12th floor, that soft percussion that promised a miserable commute. By the time he clocked out at 4, it had escalated to a downpour, the kind that turned streets into rivers and made the city's aging drainage system irrelevant. He stood under the employee entrance awning, watching water sheet off the edges, debating whether to run for it or wait it out. His phone showed 4:17 p.m. Emily would be getting out of after-school care in 40 minutes. Mrs. Chen had agreed to pick her up today, but Ethan wanted to be home, wanted to see her face, hear about her day, pretend the morning's humiliation hadn't left a mark. The parking lot looked like a lake. His Honda sat on the far side, patient and rusty. He pulled his jacket over his head and ran. The rain was cold, November cold, the kind that got through fabric and found skin. By the time he reached his car, he was soaked. The door protested before opening. Inside smelled like damp upholstery and something vaguely electrical that worried him, but not enough to pay a mechanic to investigate. The engine turned over on the first try. Small mercies. Ethan pulled out of the lot wipers on maximum, barely keeping up. Visibility was maybe 30 feet. The radio crackled with weather warnings and traffic reports. Flash flood advisory until midnight. Multiple accidents on the expressway. Commuters advised to seek alternate routes or delay travel. He couldn't delay. Emily was waiting. The streets were chaos. Cars crawling, brake lights reflecting red on black water, pedestrians trapped under useless umbrellas. Ethan took side streets, knowing shortcuts that added distance but avoided the worst congestion. Past the warehouses on 5th through the industrial zone where factories stood like monuments to a different era, then onto Highway 41, which would take him south toward home. The highway was better, at least. Fewer cars. People had listened to the warnings. Ethan settled into the right lane, keeping his speed steady at 45, hands tight on the wheel. The rain hammered the roof, a constant drumming that made thinking impossible, made the world contract to just this moment, this stretch of asphalt, these few feet of visibility. He'd driven through worse, Kandahar during dust storms, convoys through mountain passes where one wrong turn meant a 1,000-foot drop. This was just Chicago rain, annoying, not lethal. His phone rang through the car's ancient Bluetooth connection, a feature that worked about half the time. Emily's voice filled the small space. "Daddy, where are you?" "On my way home, princess. You with Mrs. Chen." "Yeah, but she says the bus isn't running because of floods. Can you pick us up?" Ethan checked his mirrors, the highway behind him. Empty ahead, just gray rain. "I'm still about 20 minutes out. Can you wait at the center?" "We're okay. Mrs. Chen brought cookies." "Of course she did. Tell her I'll be there soon as I can." "Drive safe, Daddy. The rain is scary. I've driven through worse. Love you." "Love you more." The call ended. Ethan smiled despite everything. Despite the rain, despite this morning, despite the constant weight of trying to be enough for a daughter who deserved the world. She was his North Star, his purpose, his proof that something in his life had gone absolutely right. The highway curved a long, gentle arc that followed the shoreline. Through the rain, Ethan could barely make out the lake, a darker gray against the storm. No other cars in sight. Just him and the weather and the persistent worry that his tires, which needed replacing 2 months ago, wouldn't grip when he needed them to. That's when his headlights caught something. At first it was just a shape wrong, somehow out of place. As he got closer, details emerged through the rain. A vehicle off the road nose down in the drainage ditch that ran parallel to the highway. Not just off the road. Wrecked. The rear end pointed skyward at an angle that said impact, said speed, said trouble. Ethan's foot hit the brake. His military training dormant but never gone kicked in. Assess, respond, act. He pulled onto the shoulder hazards on and grabbed his phone. No signal. The storm was interfering or they were in a dead zone. Either way, he couldn't call for help from here. He looked at the wrecked vehicle again. Luxury SUV, dark blue or black, hard to tell in this light. Range Rover maybe, the kind that cost more than he'd make in 5 years. Steam or smoke rose from the hood mixing with rain. No movement inside that he could see. Every instinct said keep driving. This wasn't his problem. Emergency services would find it eventually. He had Emily waiting, Mrs. Chen counting on him, his own safety to consider. But another part of him, the part shaped by years in uniform, by training, that said you never leave someone behind, by a moral code that didn't adjust for convenience, was already opening the door. The rain hit him like a physical force. Ethan jogged toward the wreck, his work boots splashing through water that came up to his ankles. As he got closer, he could see the damage. The front end was crumpled. The right side scraped raw metal, peeled back like skin. The vehicle had rolled at least once before landing in the ditch. How the hell was anyone still alive in there? He reached the driver's side, wiping rain from his eyes, peering through the window. Someone was inside. The driver slumped against the deployed airbag, blood on their face, not moving. Ethan tried the door, jammed. He moved to the back door, also jammed. The impact had warped the frame. He circled to the passenger side, the angle awkward, the ditch muddy and unstable. This door opened screaming on damaged hinges. Ethan climbed inside, rain following him, and reached for the driver. That's when he saw her face. Recognition hit like voltage. Clara Stratton, the CEO who'd humiliated him 8 hours ago. The woman who'd called him "you people" in front of her board, who'd said he'd never rise above the floor he cleaned. She was unconscious, head tilted at an angle that made his medic training scream danger, blood running from a cut above her eyebrow, more blood at her hairline. Her expensive suit was torn, airbag dust covering everything. For maybe 2 seconds, Ethan froze. The universe had placed his tormentor in front of him, helpless, bleeding, and he could just walk away. Call it karma. Call it justice. She'd be found eventually. Maybe. Then her eyes fluttered open. Help. The word was barely a whisper. Please. And just like that, the decision was made. Not because of who she was, because of who he was. I've got you. Stay still. His voice shifted into the tone he'd used in field hospitals, calm but commanding. Can you move your legs? She tried wincing. I think so. Your neck. Any sharp pain. Everything hurts. I know, but I need you to focus. Sharp pain like something's wrong internally, or just impact pain. Impact. She coughed and he saw panic flash across her face. I can't get out. The door won't. I know, I'm going to get you out through the passenger side, but I need you to stay calm. The car's leaking something and we need to move fast. Can you unbuckle? Her hands fumbled at the seatbelt, shaking too much to find the release. Ethan reached across her, his presence filling the small space, and clicked it free. The belt retracted. Okay, I'm going to pull you across the console. It's going to hurt. I'm sorry, but there's no other way. Who are you? She was looking at him now, really looking, trying to place him through pain and shock. Someone who's going to get you out of here. Ready. He didn't wait for an answer. His hands went under her arms, supporting her weight, and he pulled. She cried out, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop, because through the rain, he smelled it now. Gasoline. The leak was gasoline, and somewhere in that crumpled engine, something was hot enough to turn this wreck into a fireball. Clara cleared the driver's seat, her body limp, trusting him because she had no choice. Ethan backed out of the passenger door, pulling her with him, his boots sliding in mud. They emerged into the rain, and he lifted her fully, one arm under her knees, one supporting her back. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "No, you can't. Hold on to me." She did, her arms going around his neck, and Ethan carried her away from the wreck, away from the highway, into the relative shelter of some scraggly trees that lined the ditch. He set her down gently, propping her against a trunk, and stripped off his jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders. "Stay here. Don't move." "Where are you?" But he was already running back to the SUV. Her purse, her phone, anything that might be important. He reached through the passenger door, grabbing an expensive leather bag from the floor, and that's when he heard it. A soft whoomp. Flames appeared under the hood, small at first, then spreading. The gasoline had found ignition. Ethan ran. He'd made it maybe 15 feet when the SUV exploded. The shockwave hit his back, propelling him forward, heat washing over him. He hit the ground, rolled, came up running, and didn't stop until he reached Clara. She was staring at the fireball, at what had been a $200,000 vehicle, now burning like a torch against the gray storm. Her face was white. "You just saved my life." Ethan was breathing hard, adrenaline coursing through him. "Yeah, we need to get you to a hospital." "My phone?" She was patting her pockets, panic rising. "I need to call." "Here." He handed her the purse he'd grabbed. She fumbled through it, pulled out a shattered iPhone. The screen was spider-webbed, completely dead. No. She looked at him. "Do you have a phone?" He pulled out his ancient Android. "No signal. The storm's blocking it. We need to get back to my car, get to higher ground, somewhere I can call for help." Clara tried to stand, made it halfway up, and her legs gave out. Ethan caught her before she hit the ground. "I'm okay," she said clearly. "Not okay. I just need a minute. You're in shock. You probably have a concussion. You're not walking anywhere. You can't carry me the whole way. Watch me." He lifted her again, and this time she didn't protest. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breathing shallow. Ethan made his way back toward the highway, toward his car, each step careful in the mud and rain. She was lighter than he expected, or adrenaline made her feel that way. Behind them, the SUV burned a beacon in the storm. His Honda looked like a chariot when they reached it. Ethan set Clara down long enough to open the passenger door, then helped her inside. She collapsed into the seat, shaking, whether from cold or shock. He couldn't tell. He ran around to the driver's side, climbed in, started. The engine cranked the heat to maximum. The car filled with the smell of wet clothes and blood, and something else, something like fate rearranging itself. Clara was staring at him, and he could see the moment recognition finally clicked into place. "You," her voice was hoarse, "you're the janitor from this morning." "Ethan Cole." He was checking his phone, still no signal. "We need to get you medical attention." "You saved me." She said it like she couldn't quite believe it. "After what I said to you, after how I treated you, you still saved me." "That's what people do." He put the car in gear, eased back onto the highway. The rain was letting up slightly, visibility improving. They help each other. Not in my world. He glanced at her, this woman who ruled a corporate empire, who made decisions that affected thousands, now sitting in his decade-old Honda, bleeding, shaking, completely powerless. "Maybe you need a better world." She laughed, a sound that turned into a cough. "Maybe I do." They drove in silence for a few minutes. Ethan's mind was racing, trying to figure out the best route to the nearest hospital. Memorial was closest, maybe 10 minutes if he pushed it, but the roads were still dangerous and his car wasn't exactly built for speed. "Why did you stop?" Clara asked suddenly. "You could have driven past. No one would have known." "I would have known." "That's it. That's your reason. That's the only reason that matters." She was quiet, processing this, and Ethan could see her struggling with something. Finally, she said, "I was horrible to you this morning." "Yes, you were." "I don't usually, I'm not." She stopped, started again. "That's a lie. I am usually like that, demanding, critical. I don't see people, I see functions. You were the janitor who made me look bad in front of my board." I was the person who accidentally bumped your bucket. Right, a person. She closed her eyes. I forgot that. Ethan's phone suddenly buzzed. Signal was back. He handed it to Clara. Call 911. Tell them we're heading to Memorial, that you were in an accident, possible concussion cuts and bruises. They'll be ready for you. She made the call, her voice shifting into something more controlled, more CEO-like, even as blood dripped from her hairline. When she finished, she looked at him again. The operator asked if I was alone. I said no, that someone rescued me. She paused. I didn't use your name. I should have. You deserve credit. I don't need credit. Everyone needs credit. Not everyone. He took a turn, the hospital sign visible ahead. Some of us just need to sleep at night knowing we did the right thing. Memorial's emergency entrance appeared through the rain lights, bright against the storm. Ethan pulled up to the ambulance bay, and immediately 2 nurses were there, a wheelchair appearing. They opened Clara's door, helping her out, asking questions. She answered mechanically, but her eyes stayed on Ethan. Wait, she said as they started to wheel her inside. Your jacket, your phone. Keep the jacket. I'll get the phone later. I don't even know your number. I work at your building. You can find me. A nurse was gesturing impatiently. Ma'am, we need to get you inside. Clara looked torn, like there was something else she wanted to say, but the moment passed. They wheeled her through automatic doors, and she disappeared into the bright fluorescent world of emergency medicine. Ethan sat in his car for a moment, the engine idling, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and a weird sense of dislocation. Had that really just happened? Had he really pulled Clara Stratton from a burning car? His phone, still on the passenger seat, rang. Emily. Daddy, where are you? Mrs. Chen needs to go home. Reality snapped back into focus. I'm coming, princess. 10 minutes. There was an accident on the highway. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'll tell you about it when I get there. He pulled away from the hospital, back into the rain, back toward his real life. In the rear-view mirror, Memorial's lights faded. He wondered if Clara Stratton would remember this tomorrow, if she'd remember that the man she'd belittled had been the one to pull her from death, or if it would just become another story she told at cocktail parties about the time she survived a car accident. Probably the latter. People like her didn't really change. But as Ethan drove through the storm, his clothes still damp, his heart still racing, he realized something. He didn't save her for gratitude. He didn't save her for recognition, or to prove a point, or to make her feel guilty. He saved her because when you strip away the titles and the money and the power, there was just a person who needed help, and that was enough. The after-school center was closing when he arrived. Mrs. Chen stood under an awning with Emily, both looking worried. When Emily saw him, she ran through the rain, and he caught her, held her tight. You're all wet, Daddy. I know, long story. Mrs. Chen approached her, face concerned. Mr. Cole, you look terrible. What happened? There was an accident. I helped someone. Everything's okay. She studied him with eyes that had seen enough of life to know when someone was telling the whole truth and when they were protecting their daughter from worry. She patted his arm. You are a good man. Go home. Rest. In the car, Emily peppered him with questions. Who was in the accident? Were they hurt? Was he scared? He answered carefully, editing out the parts that would give her nightmares, turning it into a story about helping a stranger. Was it someone nice? She asked. Ethan thought about that. I don't know yet, but everyone deserves help, nice or not. That's what you always say. Because it's true. At home, he made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner because that's all he had energy for. Emily chattered about her day, about how she'd helped another student with math, about a book she wanted from the library, normal things, beautiful things, the things that mattered. After she went to bed, Ethan stood in the shower, letting hot water wash away the rain and the blood and the smell of smoke. His hands shook, slightly delayed reaction finally hitting. He'd pulled someone from a burning vehicle. He'd saved a life. The woman who'd humiliated him was alive because he'd stopped. He thought about her face when she recognized him. The shock, the shame, the confusion. Then he thought about tomorrow, about returning to Stratton Industries, about whether anything would be different or if this would all just fade into irrelevance. Probably irrelevant. World kept turning. Floors still needed mopping. He dried off, checked on Emily one more time, and collapsed into bed. Sleep came quickly, heavy and dreamless, the sleep of someone who'd earned it. What Ethan didn't know, couldn't know, was that across the city, in a hospital room with machines beeping and nurses checking vitals, Clara Stratton lay awake staring at the ceiling, wearing a janitor's jacket that smelled like industrial cleaner and cheap coffee, and for the first time in years, she was thinking about what it meant to be human. Really thinking about it. Not as a concept or a PR strategy or something to mention in speeches, but as a fact she'd forgotten and almost died to remember. And in her mind on repeat were his words, "That's what people do. They help each other." In her world, people didn't just help. They leveraged, they networked, they calculated cost-benefit analyses. But this man, this janitor she'd dismissed as beneath notice, had risked his life without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. She touched the cut on her forehead, feeling the stitches the doctor had put in. 3 inches to the left, and she would have bled out before anyone found her. The SUV was completely destroyed, the police had told her, if she'd been trapped any longer. She pulled his jacket tighter, and that's when she felt it. Something in the pocket. She reached in, pulled out a photograph, bent and worn. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on a man's shoulders, both laughing at the camera. The girl had a gap-toothed smile. The man was Ethan Younger in military uniform. On the back, written in child's handwriting, "Me and Daddy at the zoo. Best day ever." Clara stared at the photo for a long time, this glimpse into a life she'd never considered, and felt something crack inside her chest. This wasn't just a janitor. This was a father, a veteran, a person with a daughter who thought days at the zoo were the best days ever. This was someone she'd never bothered to see. The nurse came in to check her vitals, found her crying, and asked if she was in pain. Clara nodded because she was. Just not the kind medicine could fix. Morning came with the insistent beeping of hospital machines, and a headache that felt like her skull had been split open and poorly reassembled. Clara opened her eyes to white ceiling tiles, fluorescent lights, and the chemical smell of disinfectant. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was or why. Every muscle in her body screamed protest. Then it came back. The hydroplaning, the guardrail, the fire, the janitor's face in the rain. A nurse appeared checking the IV line, making notes on a tablet. "Good morning, Ms. Stratton. How are you feeling?" "Like I was in a car accident." "That's accurate." The nurse smiled professionally. "Doctor will be in soon. Your assistant called 3 times overnight. We told her you were stable." "What time is it?" 6:45. Clara sat up too quickly, immediately regretted it as the room tilted. "I need to get out of here. I have meetings." "Doctor needs to clear you first. You had a serious concussion. We're monitoring for internal bleeding." "I'm fine." "Ms. Stratton, you were in a rollover accident and pulled from a burning vehicle. You're many things, but fine isn't one of them." The nurse's tone was kind but firm. "Give it a few hours. Let us make sure you're actually okay." Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She sank back against the pillows, and that's when she noticed she was still wearing the jacket. His jacket. She touched the worn fabric, felt the weight of the photograph still in the pocket. The doctor arrived an hour later, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, who examined Clara with efficient thoroughness. Pupils, reflexes, the stitches on her forehead, questions about nausea and dizziness and vision. "You're lucky," the doctor said finally. "Very lucky. Another hour in that ditch and hypothermia would have complicated things. The man who pulled you out probably saved your life." "I know. Concussion protocol says we should keep you another 24 hours for observation, but I know you're not going to listen to that." The doctor gave her a knowing look. "So here's the deal. You can leave, but not alone. Someone needs to monitor you. wake you every few hours, watch for symptoms, and you need complete rest for at least 3 days. No screens, no stress, no work. That's impossible. Then stay here. Clara closed her eyes. The doctor was right, and they both knew it. Fine, I'll have my assistant arrange something. After the doctor left, Clara called Patricia on the hospital phone, her own cell phone still a shattered brick of useless technology. The call went to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail, a third time, and finally Patricia answered, sounding harried. Ms. Stratton, thank God. Are you all right? I'm being discharged. I need you to come get me and arrange for someone to stay at my penthouse for a few days. The doctor insists on observation. There was a pause, the kind of pause that preceded bad news. Ms. Stratton, I'm in Singapore. You sent me here yesterday for the acquisition meetings. Remember, I won't be back until Friday. Clara had completely forgotten. Fine, send someone else. Everyone's scattered. James is in London. Michelle is handling the product launch in Austin. Roberts, dealing with the lawsuit in New York. Another pause. And Ms. Stratton, the storm last night caused major flooding. Half the city is shut down. The roads to your building are completely blocked. They're saying it could be days before they're clear. Days. The mayor declared a state of emergency. They're evacuating some areas. Clara felt the walls closing in. So what am I supposed to do? Sleep in the hospital. I can try to find a hotel near Memorial, but with the evacuation, everything's probably full and you'd still need someone to monitor you. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry, Ms. Stratton. If I could be there, I would be. Do you have any friends in the area, family? The question hit harder than it should have. Friends. When was the last time she'd spent time with anyone who wasn't on her payroll or trying to get something from her? Her mother lived in Connecticut, and they hadn't spoken in months. Her brother was somewhere in Europe doing whatever it was failed artists did with trust funds. Friends. She'd sacrificed friendship on the altar of success years ago. Never mind, Clara said. I'll figure it out. She hung up and stared at the window at the gray sky beyond. This was absurd. She was Clara Stratton, CEO of a billion-dollar company. She had resources, connections, power, and yet here she was, stranded in a hospital with no way home and no one willing to help. No, that wasn't true. Someone had helped. Someone had risked his life without hesitation, expected nothing in return, and left his jacket wrapped around her shoulders like a promise. The photograph was still in her hand. She looked at it again, at the little girl's joy, at the father's pride, and made a decision that felt both crazy and somehow inevitable. The hospital had given her a bag with her recovered belongings. Her wallet had survived, credit cards intact. She found a phone charger in the gift shop, got her destroyed iPhone, connected long enough to extract one piece of information from the cloud before it died completely. She'd had HR send her the files on every employee after the coffee incident, part of her plan to understand who had humiliated her. Ethan Cole, building services, personnel file included an emergency contact number. She used the hospital phone one more time. It rang 4 times before he answered, sounding distracted. Hello, Mr. Cole, this is Clara Stratton. Silence. Then carefully, Ms. Stratton, are you all right? I'm being discharged from the hospital, but there's a complication. She explained the situation, the flooded roads, the absent assistant, the doctor's orders, hearing how pathetic it sounded as she spoke. I know this is an imposition, and after yesterday, after what I said to you, I have no right to ask, but I don't know who else to call. More silence. She could hear him breathing, could almost feel him thinking through the implications. The awkwardness, the sheer strangeness of his boss's boss's boss asking him for help. Where are you? He said finally. Memorial Hospital, but I can arrange a car. I just need... The roads are underwater, Miss Stratton. No cars getting through to the north side. Not today. He sighed, and she heard something that might have been Emily's voice in the background. I'm off work today because of the flooding. I'm home with my daughter. It's not much, but you're welcome to stay here until the road's clear. if you're desperate enough." The words hung between them, weighted with yesterday's cruelty and last night's grace. Clara looked around her private room at the machines and the sterile efficiency and thought about spending days here alone or taking her chances at an overcrowded evacuation center. "I'm desperate enough." "Okay, I can be there in 30 minutes. Mr. Cole." She stopped, unsure how to say what needed saying. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen where I live." He hung up. Clara sat on the edge of the hospital bed, still wearing his jacket, still holding the photograph of his daughter, and wondered what she'd just agreed to. True to his word, Ethan arrived 27 minutes later, appearing in her doorway wet from the rain that hadn't stopped, looking tired and uncomfortable in jeans and a faded Marines t-shirt. He held a plastic bag. "Brought you some clothes, my wife's stuff. She was about your size." He said it matter-of-factly, but Clara caught the past tense, the careful neutrality. "Your wife passed away 6 years ago. These have just been sitting in a box. Figured you can't leave in a hospital gown." Clara took the bag, finding clean jeans, a sweater, sneakers that had seen better days. "Thank you, I'll return them." "No need. Like I said, they've just been sitting there." She changed in the bathroom, catching sight of herself in the mirror. The stitches on her forehead were ugly, a reminder of how close she'd come. The clothes fit reasonably well, worn soft from use, smelling faintly of storage and detergent. She looked nothing like herself. Good. Ethan signed her discharge papers while she gathered her ruined belongings. They walked through the hospital together, an odd pair, the CEO and the janitor, neither quite knowing how to navigate this reversal of roles. His old Honda waited in the lot, somehow looking even worse in daylight. "Sorry about the car," he said, opening her door. "Not exactly what you're used to." "It runs. That's more than mine does." He almost smiled at that, and they drove in silence through streets that looked like war zones. Water stood in pools, debris scattered everywhere, whole sections blocked by police barriers. The storm had gutted the city's infrastructure. Traffic lights were out. Storefronts showed water damage. This wasn't just bad. This was catastrophic. "How's your neighborhood?" Clara asked. "Higher ground. We're okay. Lost power for a few hours last night, but it came back." They crossed into the south side, the buildings getting shorter, older, the prosperity of downtown giving way to something more honest. Clara had driven through areas like this, always passing through on her way somewhere else, never stopping to look. Now she was looking, really looking. The corner store with iron bars on the windows, the apartment buildings with laundry hanging on balconies, the people on stoops, neighbors checking on neighbors, helping each other clean up storm damage. Community. The word came to her unbidden. This was what community looked like. Ethan pulled up in front of a 3-story brick building that had probably been built in the 60s and hadn't been updated since. He grabbed her bag. "3rd floor. Hope you're okay with stairs." The stairwell smelled like cooking, an old carpet. Someone's music played behind a door, salsa rhythms thumping. On the 2nd floor, Clara heard a baby crying. Normal sounds. Life sounds so different from her building, where soundproofing ensured you never had to acknowledge your neighbors existed. Ethan's apartment was at the end of the 3rd floor hall. He unlocked 3 separate locks, and Clara filed that information away about neighborhoods where 3 locks were necessary. The door opened to a space smaller than her walk-in closet. Living room, kitchen, everything compact and worn but achingly clean. Furniture that didn't match but was arranged with care. Children's drawings taped to the refrigerator. A bookshelf crammed with paperbacks and what looked like engineering textbooks. The water stain on the ceiling shaped like a bird. And sitting at the small table working on homework was the girl from the photograph. Emily looked up, her eyes going wide. "Daddy, who's this?" "Emily, this is Ms. Stratton. She was in an accident yesterday. She's going to stay with us for a little while until the road's clear. Ms. Stratton, this is my daughter, Emily." The girl stood polite but curious, taking in Clara's stitches, the borrowed clothes. "Are you okay? Does it hurt?" "I'm okay. Your father saved me." He's good at that. He saves things. Emily said it with complete confidence, like it was just a fact about her father. Are you hungry? We have soup. Daddy makes really good soup. Clara realized she was starving. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. You're a guest. Ethan was already in the kitchen pulling out a pot. Emily, can you set the table for 3? Sure, Daddy. Clara watched the girl move through the small space, with easy familiarity pulling out mismatched bowls, setting them carefully. There was a grace to it, a rhythm of practiced routine. This was home. Not in the architectural sense, not in the square footage or the quality of finishes, but in the way a father and daughter moved around each other, anticipating needs, comfortable in shared silence. You can sit, Emily said, gesturing to the couch. The springs are broken on one side, so sit on the left. Clara sat where directed, and Emily plopped down next to her, openly studying her. You're really pretty, even with the stitches. Thank you. Are you my dad's boss? Something like that. Is he in trouble? Sometimes people at his work are mean to him. He doesn't tell me, but I know. The words were a knife. Clara met the girl's eyes, seeing intelligence there, awareness beyond her years. No, he's not in trouble. He's actually the opposite of in trouble. Ethan brought over 3 bowls of soup chicken noodle, homemade from the smell of it. They ate at the small table Clara between father and daughter, and it was possibly the strangest meal of her life. Emily chattered about school, about a science project on weather that was suddenly very relevant, about her friend Jenny, who said mean things sometimes, but was still her friend. Jenny says we're poor, Emily said, suddenly looking at Clara. Are we poor, Emily? Ethan's voice held a warning. I'm just asking. Ms. Stratton is rich, right? She's a CEO, so she would know if we're poor compared to rich people. Clara set down her spoon, looking at this 8-year-old who'd just asked the most direct question anyone had asked her in years. I think, she said carefully, that being rich isn't about money. It's about having what matters. You have a father who loves you, a home, food, safety. Some of the richest people I know don't have any of that. Do you, Emily tilted her head, have what matters? The question hung in the air. Ethan started to intervene, but Clara held up a hand. No, she said honestly, I don't think I do. Emily considered this with the seriousness of childhood. That's sad. Maybe you can stay here for a while and figure out how to get it. Daddy's really good at helping people figure things out. Emily, finish your soup, Ethan said, but his eyes met Clara's across the table, something unreadable there. After lunch, Ethan set Clara up in his bedroom, insisting she take the bed that doctor's orders meant rest, that he'd sleep on the couch. The room was small, just space for a double bed and a dresser, but it was clean, the sheets obviously fresh. On the dresser sat a photograph, Ethan, and a woman younger, both laughing, the woman pregnant. That's Sarah, Emily said from the doorway. My mom, she died when I was a baby. I'm sorry. It's okay, I don't really remember her, but Daddy says she was wonderful, and I believe him because he doesn't lie. The girl came closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. He gets sad sometimes, when he thinks I'm asleep, but mostly he's happy because he has me. Clara felt something crack in her chest, the same feeling from last night in the hospital. You're very lucky to have each other. I know, Emily studied her again. You can borrow my stuffed bear if you want. Sometimes when I'm sad or hurt, Mr. Patches helps. Before Clara could respond, the girl disappeared and returned with a threadbare teddy bear, one eye missing, stitched and restitched from years of love. She placed it on the bed with ceremony. There, now you'll sleep better. Then she was gone, leaving Clara alone with the bear and the photograph, and the overwhelming sense that she'd entered a world she didn't understand, where 8-year-olds offered their most precious possessions to strangers, and broken things were stitched back together instead of thrown away. She lay down, exhaustion finally catching up, and fell asleep holding the bear. When she woke, it was dark outside. The apartment was quiet except for soft voices from the living room. Clara checked her watch. 8 o'clock. She'd slept for hours. Her head still ached, but the sharp edge was gone, replaced by a dull throb that was almost manageable. She got up slowly, moving to the doorway. In the living room, Ethan sat on the couch. Emily curled against him, both reading a book together. The light was soft, just one lamp on, and they looked like a painting, like something Norman Rockwell would have captured about American fatherhood. Ethan looked up, saw her. "Hey, how are you feeling?" "Better. I'm sorry I didn't mean to sleep so long." "Doctor said rest. You're following orders." He closed the book, carefully marked the page. Emily was just heading to bed. "Say good night." "Good night, Ms. Stratton." The girl stood, then impulsively hugged Clara. "I'm glad you're here. Daddy needs more friends." Before Clara could process that, Emily disappeared into her room. Ethan stood, moved, to the kitchen. "Tea, coffee, I've got both." Tea would be nice. He filled the kettle, set it to boil, pulled out 2 mugs. Clara sat at the table, watching him move through domestic rituals with the same efficiency he brought to cleaning floors. Everything had its place, everything done with care. "I'm sorry about Emily," he said. "She's at that age where she says everything she thinks." "Don't apologize. She's wonderful." "Yeah, she is." He poured hot water over tea bags, brought the mugs to the table. "She gets it from her mother. Sarah was like that too. Completely honest, completely open, no filters." "How long were you married?" 4 years. We met right after I got out of the Marines. She was a teacher, kindergarten. She saw me at a coffee shop, said I looked like I needed someone to talk to. He smiled at the memory. She was right. I was a mess. PTSD survivor's guilt, no idea what to do with my life. She just sat down and listened. 3 months later, we were married. 10 months after that, Emily was born. 2 months after that, Sarah was gone. I can't imagine. No one can until it happens. He sipped his tea. Everyone kept telling me it would get easier. It doesn't. You just get stronger at carrying the weight. Clara thought about her own life, the relationships she'd sacrificed, the family she'd pushed away, the friends she'd outgrown. I've never been married, never been close. Why not? Too busy, too focused, too... She stopped searching for the word. Too convinced that success meant doing it alone. And has it made you successful? By every measurable standard, yes. I run a company worth billions. I make decisions that affect thousands of people. I'm respected, feared, quoted in journals. She looked at him. And yesterday, when I needed help, I had no one to call but you. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Ethan didn't offer platitudes or empty comfort. He just nodded like he understood. You know what I realized after Sarah died, he said. Success isn't about what you build. It's about who you become while building it. I could have let grief destroy me. Could have checked out, let Emily grow up with a father who was physically present but emotionally gone. Instead, I decided to show up. Every day, every moment, show up and be the father she deserves. That's why you take the humiliation, why you kept your head down yesterday when I said those things. Partly, but also because I know who I am. Your words couldn't change that. They hurt, yeah, but they couldn't touch what matters. He looked at her directly. The question is, do you know who you are when no one's watching, when there's no board to impress, no stock price to justify? Clara opened her mouth, closed it. The honest answer was no. She'd spent so long being the CEO, the leader, the woman who had to be perfect and powerful and untouchable, that she'd forgotten there was supposed to be a person underneath. From Emily's room came a soft sound. Clara tilted her head, listening. It was prayer, the girl's voice barely audible, but unmistakable in its sincerity. And please help the lady Daddy saved to smile again, because she looks so sad and everyone deserves to be happy, even if they're rich and important. Help her find friends, help her find what matters. Amen. The words broke something in Clara that had been cracking since the moment Ethan pulled her from the burning car. She put her hand over her mouth, but it was too late. Tears came hot and unexpected, years of them, decades of them, all the emotion she'd locked away to be strong and successful and untouchable. She cried for the person she'd become, for the people she'd hurt, for the life she'd built that looked perfect from the outside but was completely hollow within. She cried because an 8-year-old stranger was praying for her soul, and because she couldn't remember the last time anyone had cared enough to try. Ethan didn't say anything. He just pushed a box of tissues across the table and let her cry, understanding somehow that this was necessary, that some things had to break before they could be fixed. When the tears finally stopped, Clara wiped her eyes, embarrassed and exhausted and somehow lighter. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Emily has that effect on people. She sees what's real." "What does she see in me?" "Someone who needs help, someone who's lost, someone who can be found if they're willing to look." Clara laughed, a sound that was half sob. "I've spent 20 years building an empire, and your 8-year-old daughter understands life better than I do. Kids haven't learned to lie to themselves yet. It's their superpower." Ethan finished his tea, set down the mug. "You should rest. Doctor said every few hours I need to wake you, check you're okay. Set an alarm." "I will." But she didn't move. "Mr. Cole, Ethan, why are you doing this? After everything I said, after how I treated you, you had every right to let me figure this out on my own." He stood gathering the mugs, moving to the sink. When he spoke, his back was to her, his voice quiet but clear. "Because when I was at my lowest, broken and lost and convinced I was worthless, Sarah saw something worth saving. She didn't have to. I was just some messed up veteran in a coffee shop, but she chose to see me, really see me, and that changed everything." He turned, met her eyes. "Maybe someone needs to see you too, really see you, before it's too late." He left her there, disappearing to make up the couch for himself, and Clara sat in the small kitchen of a tiny apartment in a neighborhood she'd never visited, wearing a dead woman's clothes, healing from an accident that should have killed her, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt something that might have been hope. The alarm on Clara's borrowed phone went off at midnight, startling her from shallow sleep. She sat up disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. Ethan's bedroom, his dead wife's clothes, a child's teddy bear clutched in her arms. Before she could silence the alarm, there was a soft knock on the door. "Ms. Stratton, just checking in. Doctor's orders." Ethan's voice was quiet, considerate of the hour. Clara opened the door to find him standing there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking as tired as she felt. "I'm okay. Headache's better. No nausea. Vision, any blurriness. Clear. Good." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his tell for uncertainty. "Try to sleep some more. I'll check again at 3. He turned to go, but Clara found herself speaking. "Ethan, wait. Can I ask you something?" He stopped, turned back. "Sure. The books on your shelf, engineering textbooks, advanced calculus, structural design, fluid dynamics. Those aren't exactly light reading for a janitor." Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. "You went through my stuff." "No, I could see them from here. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I recognize the titles." She paused. "What happened? Why aren't you using that education?" For a long moment he just looked at her, weighing whether to answer, whether this stranger in his home had earned the truth. Finally he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I was in the Marines, did 2 tours doing disaster relief and infrastructure work. Learned more in those 4 years than most people learn in a lifetime. When I got out, I had plans, big ones. Engineering school already halfway through my degree. I was going to rebuild things, make things better, use what I'd learned overseas to help communities here." His voice was steady, but Clara heard the weight beneath it. "Then Sarah died. Suddenly I had a 3-month-old who needed me every second of every day. Daycare costs more than I was making. Night classes meant leaving Emily with babysitters I couldn't afford. The debt started piling up, medical bills from Sarah's emergency funeral costs, just trying to survive." "So you stopped?" I didn't stop. I adapted, took whatever work I could get, whatever hours allowed me to be there for Emily. First, it was night security, then maintenance, then janitorial. Each step felt like going backward, but each step meant Emily had a father who was present, who could take her to school, who could be there when she was sick or scared or just needed a dad. Clara thought about her own choices, the promotions she'd chased, the relationships she'd sacrificed, the singular focus that had taken her to the top. Do you regret it? Regret choosing my daughter over my career? He smiled, but there was sadness in it. Some mornings, yeah. When someone like you reminds me I'll never rise above the floor I clean. When Emily asks why we can't afford things her friends have, when I see who I could have been, but then she laughs at something stupid I said, or she shows me she got 100 on a spelling test, or she falls asleep on my shoulder reading books, and I remember that I made the only choice that mattered. You gave up your dreams. No, I changed them. There's a difference. He pushed off the doorframe. Get some sleep. 3 a.m. comes fast. This time, when he left, Clara didn't call him back. She lay in the darkness thinking about dreams and sacrifice and the price of the choices we make. She'd sacrificed everything for success, and what did she have? A corner office, a stock portfolio, and an empty penthouse where the only sound was her own breathing. Ethan had sacrificed success for something more fragile and infinitely more valuable, and he lived in a cramped apartment filled with love. The math didn't make sense, except it did. True to his word, Ethan woke her at 3 and again at 6. Each time she was okay, the headache fading, her mind clearer. When she finally got up for good at 7:30, she found Emily at the kitchen table doing homework and Ethan making breakfast, the apartment smelling like coffee and toast. Morning, Emily said cheerfully. You look better. The stitches are less scary now. Thanks, I think. Do you like pancakes? Daddy makes them on Wednesdays because Wednesday is the middle of the week, and the middle is always the hardest part. Clara smiled despite herself. I like pancakes. Ethan flipped 3 perfect circles on the griddle. Emily's theory is that breakfast foods improve everything. She's not wrong. They ate together again, that strange ritual of shared meals at a table barely big enough for 3. Emily kept up a running commentary about school, about her teacher who wore funny earrings, about the science project that was due Friday, and how she wanted to do something about storms, since they'd just had such a big one. Maybe Miss Stratton could help you, Ethan suggested. She runs a technology company, probably knows a lot about data and weather patterns. Emily's eyes lit up. Really? Would you help me? Clara, who hadn't helped anyone with homework since she'd been in school, found herself nodding. Sure, what's your topic? How do meteorologists predict storms? I want to know why they knew this one was coming, but people still got hurt. It was a more profound question than the girl probably realized. Clara thought about her own drive home, about ignoring the warnings, about thinking she was somehow above the danger. That's a really good question. Sometimes people know the danger is there, but convince themselves they'll be fine anyway. That's dumb. Yeah, Clara said quietly. It really is. After breakfast, while Ethan cleaned up, Emily pulled out her science notebook and spread research materials across the couch. Clara found herself explaining atmospheric pressure and radar technology, watching the girl's face light up with understanding, feeling something unfamiliar and warm at being able to share knowledge with someone who genuinely wanted to learn. You're really smart, Emily said after an hour. Daddy's smart too, but different smart. He knows how things work. You know why they work. Your dad's smarter than you think. He just hasn't had the chance to show it. Emily looked at her father, who was now fixing something under the kitchen sink, his shoulders visible as he worked. I know he's smart. I just wish other people knew it too. The words hung in the air, a child's simple wish that held an entire world of complexity. Clara watched Ethan work, saw the competence in his movements, the problem-solving intelligence that had been relegated to maintenance work, and felt something shift inside her. Around noon, Clara's phone rang. She'd managed to charge it enough to make calls, though the screen was still shattered. Patricia's number flashed across the broken glass. "Ms. Stratton, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Where are you?" "I'm safe. The roads were too flooded to get home, so I found somewhere to stay until they clear. The board is asking questions. They want to know about the accident, about your condition, about the Singapore deal. Tell them I'm fine and the deal closes as planned. I'll conference in from here." "From where exactly?" Clara looked around the small apartment, at Emily doing homework, at Ethan, now sitting in an armchair reading something that looked like an engineering journal. "Somewhere I'm learning more than I would in any boardroom." Patricia paused, clearly confused. "Ms. Stratton, are you sure you're okay? Did you hit your head harder than—" "I'm fine, Patricia, better than fine. I'll be back in the office when the road's clear. Until then, handle what you can and send me anything urgent via email." She hung up before her assistant could ask more questions. Ethan was watching her, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to stay," he said. "If you need to work, if this is too much, I'm exactly where I need to be." The afternoon passed in a way Clara hadn't experienced in years. No meetings, no emails, no constant pressure to perform. Instead, she helped Emily with her project, listened to Ethan explain how he was fixing the sink with parts he'd MacGyvered from other appliances because new parts cost too much, watched them interact with the easy rhythm of two people who knew each other completely. Around 3, there was a knock at the door. Ethan answered it to find an elderly Chinese woman with kind eyes and a covered dish. "Mrs. Chen, you didn't have to do this. The flooding damaged my kitchen, can't cook, but I made this before plenty left. You take." She thrust the dish at him, then noticed Clara. "Oh, you have guessed." "Mrs. Chen, this is Clara. She was in an accident and needed somewhere to stay. Clara, this is Mrs. Chen, our neighbor, and Emily's after-school guardian angel." Mrs. Chen's eyes went sharp, assessing. Then she nodded once. "Good. Mr. Cole is too alone. Needs more people. You stay, you eat, you learn what good man looks like." Before Clara could respond, the woman was gone, leaving behind a dish that smelled incredible and a pronouncement that felt like a benediction. "She's direct," Clara said. "She's earned it." Ethan carried the dish to the kitchen. "Her husband died last year. She's been alone since, but she still looks out for everyone else. That's just how she is, how people are here." Clara thought about her own building where she'd lived for 5 years and couldn't name a single neighbor. "I don't even know who lives next to me." "That's because you're not living, you're existing." Emily said it without judgment, just stating fact the way children do. "Living is when you know people, and people know you." From the mouths of babes. Clara sat down heavily on the couch, feeling the truth of it. The girl was right. She'd been existing, not living, running so fast toward success that she'd never stopped to build anything real. That evening, they ate Mrs. Chen's dumplings and watched a nature documentary on Ethan's small TV. Emily curled between them, asking questions about everything. When the girls started yawning, Ethan announced bedtime. Emily protested, but half-heartedly, clearly exhausted. "Can Ms. Stratton read to me tonight?" she asked suddenly. Ethan looked at Clara, offering her an out, if she wanted it. But Clara found herself nodding. "If that's okay." More than okay. In Emily's small room, decorated with drawings and science posters, and a bookshelf overflowing with stories, Clara sat on the edge of the bed while Emily got into pajamas and climbed under covers. The girl handed her a book, Where the Wild Things Are, its spine cracked from repeated readings. "This was Daddy's favorite when he was little. He gave it to me." Clara opened the book, the pages worn soft, and began to read. She wasn't good at voices or performance, but Emily didn't seem to mind, just listened with eyes growing heavy. When Clara finished, the girl was almost asleep, but she reached out, caught Clara's hand. "Will you come back? After you go home, will you visit us?" The question caught Clara off guard. "Would you want me to?" "Yeah, you're nice, and you make Daddy smile different, like he used to in pictures with Mommy." Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she just squeezed the small hand. Get some sleep, Em. Good night, Clara. The use of her first name, the acceptance it implied, made something catch in her throat. Back in the living room, Ethan was on the couch with his laptop frowning at the screen. Clara sat in the armchair watching him work. What are you doing? He glanced up, seemed to debate answering, then turned the screen toward her. It was an online course, advanced structural engineering, the kind offered by major universities for professional development. I take one class a semester, online at night after Emily's asleep. At this rate, I'll finish my degree when I'm 50, but it's something. Clara leaned forward, studying the coursework. It was graduate-level material complex and demanding. What's your GPA? 4.0. He said it without pride, just fact. Not that it matters. No one's hiring 40-year-old janitors with degrees, no matter what their grades are. That's not true, isn't it? He closed the laptop. I appreciate the optimism, but I live in the real world. The world where people like you look at people like me and see floors that need cleaning, not potential that needs opportunity. The words weren't cruel, just honest, and they hit harder because of it. Clara thought about the coffee incident, about her casual dismissal, about how many others like Ethan she'd looked through in her climb to the top. I was wrong, she said quietly. What I said that morning, how I treated you. I was cruel because I was embarrassed, and I took it out on someone who couldn't fight back. That's not leadership, that's cowardice. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. You know what hurt most? Not the words. I've heard worse. It was that you said it in front of everyone, made sure they all knew I was beneath notice. You didn't just insult me, you erased me. I know, and I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry. It's not enough, but it's all I have. Why? He looked at her directly. Why did you become that person? You have this degree, this intelligence, this power. What happened that made you think you had to step on people to rise? Clara thought about her answer, really thought about it, because he deserved honesty. My father. He ran a small manufacturing firm, treated his workers like family. When the recession hit, he refused to lay anyone off, took out loans to keep them paid, mortgaged everything to keep the doors open. It bankrupted us. We lost our home, our savings, everything. And you know what those workers did, the ones he sacrificed everything for, that they found jobs somewhere else and never looked back. My father died 6 months later, broken and forgotten. So you learned the wrong lesson. Maybe. I learned that loyalty is a liability, that compassion is weakness, that to survive you have to be harder than the world. I built Stratton Industries on that foundation. Be ruthless, be untouchable, be feared. How's that working out? The question was simple but devastating. Clara laughed, a sound without humor. I almost burned to death alone on a highway because I had no one who cared enough to check on me during a storm. I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar company, and I had to call the janitor for help because I have no friends. So you tell me. You know what your father's mistake was, not that he cared about his workers, that he expected gratitude for basic decency. You don't treat people well because you want something back. You treat them well because that's what humans do for each other. The workers who left weren't being disloyal. They were surviving, just like your father was trying to survive. Everyone's just trying to make it through. Clara stared at him, this man who cleaned floors and raised a daughter alone and took online classes at midnight and somehow understood human nature better than any executive she'd ever met. When did you get so wise? When I lost everything and discovered what actually mattered. They sat in silence, the apartment quiet, except for the distant sound of the city beyond the windows. Clara thought about her life, about the empire she'd built on fear and distance, about what it had cost her and whether the price had been worth it. If you could start over, she said finally, what would you do differently? Ethan considered the question. Nothing. Because everything I went through, every mistake and loss and hard choice, it all led to Emily. And she's worth it all. But if you're asking what I'd do, if I had your resources, your power, your chance to shape things, I'd remember that every person I meet is someone's daughter, someone's father, someone's reason for everything. I'd build a company where people weren't afraid, where work had dignity, no matter what form it took, where success was measured in lives improved, not just profits gained. That's a fantasy. Business doesn't work that way. Because people like you decided it doesn't have to. The words were a challenge, not an insult. Clara felt them land, felt the weight of possibility in them. She thought about Stratton Industries, about the culture she'd created, about the Ethans working in her buildings who had talents and dreams they'd sacrificed just to survive. What if it could change? She said slowly, thinking out loud. What if there was a way to do both, to be successful and humane? Then you'd be the first in a long time to try. An idea was forming, still vague but growing clearer. Not charity, not pity, but something structural, something that addressed the fundamental inequality she'd never bothered to notice before. She'd need to think about it, develop it properly, but the seed was there. Can I tell you something? Clara said. The board wants me to announce layoffs next quarter, 700 positions, mostly in facilities and support services. It would boost our profit margins by 8%. People like me. Yeah, people like you. I was planning to announce it next month. She met his eyes. I'm not going to do it. That's not why I told you my story. I know, but it's why I needed to hear it. The conversation drifted then into safer topics, books they'd read, places they'd traveled or wanted to travel, the ordinary small talk of people getting to know each other. It felt strange and comfortable at once, talking to someone who had no agenda, who expected nothing from her except honesty. Around 11, Clara felt exhaustion pulling at her. The concussion was still healing her body, demanding rest. She stood steadying herself. Thank you, she said, for everything, for saving my life, for giving me shelter, for showing me what I've been missing. You're welcome, but Clara, he used her first name naturally now, the formality between them dissolving. Don't thank me by trying to fix my life. I'm not a charity case. I'm not something broken that needs your resources to be whole. I have what I need. I know that. But you deserve more than what need requires. We all do. The question is, are you going to change things for everyone, or just feel guilty about the one person you happen to meet? It was the question, wasn't it the one that mattered? Clara had spent her career thinking small, thinking quarterly results and shareholder value and competitive advantage. Ethan was asking if she could think bigger, if she had the courage to actually change things. She didn't know the answer yet, but for the first time in years, she wanted to find out. In Ethan's bedroom, Clara lay in the darkness and thought about Emily's prayer, about being seen, about what it meant to really live instead of just exist. Her phone buzzed with emails, urgent matters that suddenly felt less urgent, problems that suddenly felt smaller. She thought about her father, about the lesson she'd learned from his failure, and wondered if maybe the lesson had been incomplete. Maybe he'd been right to care about his workers. Maybe his mistake had been building a system that forced him to choose between compassion and survival. Maybe the real lesson was that systems could be changed, should be changed by people with the power to change them. Clara fell asleep thinking about possibilities, about second chances, about how sometimes you had to almost die to remember how to live. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she slept without dreaming of work, without anxiety about tomorrow, without the constant pressure that had defined her existence. She slept like someone who'd finally put down a burden they'd been carrying too long, and in the morning when sunlight filtered through the worn curtains of Ethan Cole's bedroom, Clara Stratton woke up different than she'd gone to sleep. Not fixed, not transformed, but beginning to understand what transformation might look like. The morning brought news that the main roads had finally cleared. 3 days in Ethan's apartment, 3 days that had felt both endless and far too short. Clara stood at the window with her coffee, watching the city emerge from the flood's aftermath, and felt something like reluctance settle in her chest. Behind her, Emily was arguing with her father about breakfast. But Daddy, Clara likes eggs. She told me yesterday. Clara probably wants to get home, Em. She's been stuck here long enough. She doesn't look stuck. She looks happy. Clara turned from the window. I am happy, and I do like eggs, but your dad's right. I should get out of your hair. Emily's face fell. You're leaving. The roads are clear. I have a company to run a whole life I've been ignoring. Even as she said it, the words felt hollow. What life? The empty penthouse, the endless meetings with people who feared her, the loneliness she'd convinced herself was power. Ethan was scrambling eggs, his back to them both, and Clara couldn't read his expression. I'll drive you home after breakfast. Make sure you get there safe. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. I want to. They ate together one last time, the mood subdued. Emily picked at her food, uncharacteristically quiet. When she finally spoke, it was with the blunt honesty that Clara had come to expect. Are we going to see you again? Clara looked at this child who'd offered her a teddy bear and prayers and unconditional acceptance and felt her throat tighten. I hope so. Hope isn't a plan. That's what Daddy always says. You need a plan. Emily, Ethan warned gently. No, she's right. Clara set down her fork. How about this for a plan? I'll come back next week. We can work on your science project together. Make sure you get an A. Emily's face lit up. Promise. I promise. The drive to Clara's penthouse took them through parts of the city still recovering. Debris piled on sidewalks, businesses with water damage. People working together to clean up and rebuild. Clara watched it all through new eyes, seeing community where she'd once seen only inconvenience. Her building rose like a monument to wealth, all glass and steel and pristine landscaping untouched by the flood. The doorman rushed to open her door, his surprise at seeing her arrival in a beat-up Honda barely concealed. Ms. Stratton, we were so worried. Are you all right? I'm fine, Thomas. Thank you for asking. Ethan walked her up, carrying the small bag of belongings she'd accumulated. The elevator to the penthouse was all mirrors and soft lighting, a stark contrast to the 3 flights of stairs at his building. Clara caught his reflection, saw him taking it all in, and felt oddly ashamed of the excess. The penthouse was exactly as she'd left it. 2,500 square feet of minimalist design, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city furniture that looked like art, but wasn't meant for comfort. It was beautiful and cold and utterly lifeless. Ethan set down her bag, looked around. This is where you live. Technically, though I'm starting to think living requires more than just sleeping somewhere. He walked to the windows, hands in his pockets. You can see my whole neighborhood from here, probably my building if you knew where to look. The observation hung between them, the physical representation of the distance between their worlds. Clara joined him at the window shoulder, not quite touching his. Ethan, I need to tell you something. These past few days, they've changed me. Not in some superficial way, but fundamentally. I've been building my entire life on the wrong foundation. Clara, please let me finish. I'm going back to work tomorrow, and when I do, things are going to change. Real changes. Not just at Stratton Industries, but in how business operates, how we value people, how we measure success. I don't know exactly what it looks like yet, but I know it starts with dignity, with seeing people. He turned to face her. That's good. That's really good. But don't do it because of me or because you feel guilty. Do it because it's right. I'm doing it because a man I humiliated saved my life and then showed me what living actually means. I'm doing it because an 8-year-old girl prayed for my soul and meant it. I'm doing it because I almost died and realized I had nothing worth dying for. Ethan's expression was unreadable. What happens when the guilt fades? When you're back in boardrooms with people who think like you, used to think, will you remember this, or will it become just a story you tell yourself? I don't know, she said honestly, but I'm going to try. That's all anyone can do, right? Try to be better than they were yesterday. He nodded slowly. Then I hope you succeed. I really do. They stood there for a moment, the city spread out below them, and Clara realized she didn't want him to leave. didn't want to be alone in this beautiful empty space. But she could see in his posture that he was already halfway gone, already returning to the life where he belonged. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving my life, for showing me how to live it." "You're welcome." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Clara, whatever you're planning, whatever changes you want to make sure they last beyond your memory of these 3 days. Make sure they're real." After he left, Clara stood in her penthouse and felt its emptiness like a physical weight. She thought about Emily's prayer, about Ethan's sacrifice, about Mrs. Chen's dumplings, and the way neighbors knew each other's names. She thought about what she'd built and what it had cost. Then she opened her laptop and started writing. The next morning, Clara walked into Stratton Industries for the first time in a week. The stitches on her forehead had been removed, leaving a thin red line that she didn't bother to hide. Patricia met her at the elevator, tablet in hand, already rattling off urgent matters. "The board wants a full briefing on the accident. Legal wants to discuss liability. Singapore's deal closed successfully, but Hong Kong is asking for..." "Patricia, stop." Clara stepped off the elevator, looking at her assistant, really looking at her for maybe the first time. "How are you? Did the flooding affect your neighborhood?" Patricia blinked, thrown by the question. My basement flooded, lost some stuff, but I'm okay. Take whatever time you need to deal with it, and submit the expenses. The company will cover the damage." "Ms. Stratton, that's not company policy." "Then we're changing the policy. Schedule an all-hands meeting for this afternoon. Everyone. Every employee, every level, mandatory. That's 5,000 people. We don't have a space that..." "Then live stream it. I don't care how, just make it happen." Clara walked through the building with new eyes. She saw the janitors working the security guards at their posts, the cafeteria workers preparing lunch, all the people she'd looked through for years. She saw Ethan in each of them, saw their stories, their sacrifices, their worth. In her office, she called the board together, 12 men and women who'd helped her build an empire, who expected her to announce the planned layoffs to push for higher margins and greater profit. Instead, she told them about the accident, about being saved by a janitor, about spending 3 days in a world they'd never see from their corner offices. And then she told them about the changes she was implementing effective immediately. No layoffs. Instead, a human dignity initiative. Healthcare expansion, education benefits, career development paths for every position, profit sharing across all levels, a restructuring of the entire corporate culture from the ground up. The board erupted. Voices overlapped, objections flew, accusations of emotional decision-making and fiduciary irresponsibility filled the room. Clara let them talk, let them vent, and then she stood. "I hear your concerns. I understand the financial implications, but I've spent 20 years building a company where people are afraid, where work is just survival, where we measure success only in dollars. And 3 days ago I almost died, with nothing to show for any of it except a balance sheet." Her voice was steady, certain. "We're going to prove you can be profitable and humane, that success doesn't require cruelty. And if you can't support that vision, then I'll accept your resignation, effective immediately." Silence. Then one by one they nodded. Some reluctantly, some with genuine support, but they nodded. The all-hands meeting that afternoon was unprecedented. 5,000 employees watching via screens throughout the building and streaming from home, all wondering what the notoriously cold CEO wanted to announce. Clara stood in the main auditorium, no podium, no notes, just her and a microphone and the truth. "Last week I was in a car accident. I almost died, and the person who saved my life was someone I'd humiliated the day before." She paused, letting that sink in. "His name is Ethan Cole. He works in building services. I don't expect you to know him because I didn't know him either. I didn't know any of you. I knew positions and functions and outputs, but I didn't know people." She told them about the 3 days, Not all of it, not the personal parts, but enough. Enough to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be human in front of 5,000 people who'd only ever seen her as a boss. Here's what I learned. Every single person in this company has a story, has dreams they've put on hold, has talents we're not using because we're too busy thinking about quarterly results. And that's my fault. I built a culture where only certain kinds of success mattered, where only certain people were seen. That ends today. She outlined the initiatives, the expansion of benefits, the education programs, the commitment that every employee, regardless of position, would have a path forward if they wanted it, the profit sharing that would distribute success to everyone who created it. I know some of you are thinking this sounds too good to be true, that it's a PR stunt or temporary guilt. I don't blame you for that skepticism. I've earned it, but I'm asking you to give me the chance to prove it's real, to build a company we're all proud to be part of, not just proud to run. She finished with the hardest part. If you've been treated the way I treated Ethan Cole, the way I've treated countless others over the years, I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. I can't undo the past, but I can commit to a different future, starting now. When she finished, there was silence. Then from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping, then another, then more, until the entire auditorium was filled with applause, genuine and surprised and hopeful. After the meeting, Clara returned to her office to find Marcus, the building services supervisor, waiting. "Ms. Stratton, can I speak with you?" "Of course." He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. "Ethan's a good man, one of the best. And what you said today about education programs and development paths, he needs that. He's got a degree halfway finished. Took him years to get that far working full-time. If there's any way, tell me about his work, his skills." Marcus's face lit up. "He's brilliant with systems, with problem solving. Half the innovations we've made in building efficiency came from him. He just doesn't get credit because he's not in a position where credit matters." Clara made notes, plans forming. "Thank you, Marcus, for looking out for him. He'd do the same for any of us." Over the next weeks, Clara threw herself into the transformation. She met with every department head, revised policies, implemented programs, and most importantly, listened. She listened to stories like Ethan's, to struggles and dreams, and the quiet desperation of people just trying to make it through. She also kept her promise to Emily. Every week she drove to the south side, climbed 3 flights of stairs, and helped with homework or shared dinner or just talked. She met more neighbors, learned names, became part of the fabric of a community she'd never known existed. Mrs. Chen adopted her immediately. "You're learning. Good. Rich people need to learn." Ethan remained cautious, friendly, but distant, as if waiting for Clara to revert to who she'd been. She didn't blame him. Trust was earned slowly, and she was starting from negative ground. But slowly, she saw him relax, saw him smile more easily, saw the way he looked at her when she sat on his couch with Emily, helping with fractions or reading stories, as if he was recalibrating his understanding of who she was. 3 months after the accident, Clara called Ethan to her office. He arrived looking concerned, probably expecting trouble despite everything. "Sit down," she said, "please." He sat, and she slid a folder across the desk. He opened it, confusion crossing his face as he read. "What is this? It's a position. Senior Facilities Operations Manager, not entry level. A real position with real responsibility, one that uses your skills and knowledge. The salary is competitive. The benefits include tuition coverage for degree completion." She paused. "I'm not offering it because I feel guilty or because we have history. I'm offering it because you're qualified, and we need people like you in leadership." Ethan stared at the papers, his expression unreadable. "Clara, I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because it looks like favoritism, like you're trying to make yourself feel better." "It is favoritism. I'm favoring qualified people who've been overlooked. You're the first, but not the last. We're implementing similar reviews across the company." She leaned forward. "Ethan, I'm not rescuing you. I'm finally seeing what's been in front of me the whole time. You can say no, but say no because you don't want it, not because you think you don't deserve it." He was quiet for a long moment, studying the offer. What does Emily think? I haven't told her. This is your decision, but I think she'd be proud. She already is. She doesn't need my job title to be proud. But he was smiling slightly. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. He took the folder, stood to leave, then turned back. Clara. Yeah. Thank you. Not for the offer, though. I appreciate it, for actually changing, for proving it was real. After he left, Clara went at her desk and allowed herself to feel something she rarely felt anymore. Hope. Not for profit margins or market dominance, but for the possibility that people could change, that systems could improve, that dignity and success weren't mutually exclusive. Ethan accepted the position 2 days later. The transition was rocky, at first whispers about favoritism and special treatment, but he quickly proved himself indispensable. His innovations saved the company millions while improving working conditions. Other employees who'd been overlooked suddenly had champions. The culture shifted slowly but perceptibly. 6 months after the accident, on a cold evening in May, Clara sat in Ethan's apartment for what had become their weekly dinner. Emily had just finished presenting her science project results, an A+ that she'd celebrated by dancing around the living room. You did amazing, Em, Clara said, watching the girl's joy with something like maternal pride. I couldn't have done it without you. Emily hugged her impulsively. You're the best. After Emily went to bed, Ethan and Clara sat on the couch, comfortable in the silence that had developed between them. Finally, Clara pulled out an envelope. I have something for Emily. I wanted to give it to you first, make sure it was okay. Ethan opened it, his eyes widening as he read. This is a scholarship, full ride to any university, all expenses paid, including living costs. She's brilliant. In 10 years, she could be running a company or solving problems we haven't even discovered yet. She shouldn't have to worry about money getting in the way. Clara, this is too much. It's not nearly enough. You gave me back my life. Let me help secure hers. Ethan's eyes were bright, emotion raw on his face. You know what Sarah used to say? She said Emily was going to change the world. I always believed her, but I didn't know how we'd make it possible. Now you do. He looked at her and something shifted in his expression, something that made Clara's breath catch. You changed my world. You know that, right? Not with money or positions or scholarships, but by actually seeing us, by becoming real. You changed mine first. You showed me what I was missing. They sat there in the small apartment, the city humming beyond the windows, and Clara realized this was home. Not her penthouse with its view and its emptiness. This cramped space full of love and laughter and people who saw each other completely. Come in, Ethan had said that night in the rain before I changed my mind. An invitation given reluctantly, accepted desperately, that had changed everything. Clara thought about that moment often in the months that followed. How close she'd come to losing everything, and how losing everything had helped her find what mattered. The accident hadn't just broken her body, it had broken the walls she'd spent decades building, and through the cracks had come light. A year after the accident, Stratton Industries was profiled in major business journals as a case study in corporate transformation. Profits were up, but so was employee satisfaction. Retention rates had improved dramatically. Innovation was flourishing because people felt safe to take risks, to share ideas, to be seen. At the anniversary gala, Clara stood at the podium looking out at employees who no longer feared her and told the story. Not all of it, but enough. The accident, the rescue, the lessons learned from a janitor and his daughter about what actually mattered. I want to thank someone, she said. A man who reminded me that titles mean nothing if you lose your humanity. Ethan, would you come up here? Ethan, uncomfortable with attention, as always, joined her on stage. Clara handed him a small box. Inside is a key, not to anything important, just to my penthouse. because you and Emily have an open invitation anytime, always. But more importantly, it's symbolic. You opened a door for me when I was trapped, and I don't just mean from the car. Thank you for that. Thank you for seeing someone worth saving when I'd forgotten she existed." The applause was thunderous. Ethan pulled her into a hug, whispering in her ear, "You did the work. I just pointed at the door." That night after the gala, Clara drove to the south side. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to find Ethan and Emily waiting pizza already ordered, a movie queued up. They'd known she'd come, she always did. "Took you long enough," Emily said, grinning. "Movie starts in 5 minutes. Clara sat between them on the couch with the broken springs, and as the opening credits rolled, she felt Emily's head rest on her shoulder, felt Ethan's arm along the back of the couch, felt the weight of connection and belonging and being known. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, the one who'd spilled coffee on a janitor, and thought nothing of it. That woman was gone, burned away in an accident that had destroyed everything superficial and revealed what was real. She thought about her father, about the lesson she'd learned wrong. He hadn't failed because he cared about people. He'd succeeded because he cared, even if the world didn't reward him for it. The real failure would have been becoming someone who stopped caring, who measured worth only in dollars, who looked through people instead of seeing them. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked softly. "That I almost missed this, all of this. But you didn't, because you didn't let me." Emily, half asleep already, mumbled something about them being mushy. They laughed, and the movie played, and outside the city went on, full of people with stories and struggles and dreams, all of them worthy of being seen. Clara Stratton had learned what Ethan Cole already knew. That true strength wasn't about power, but about the courage to change when grace finds you. That success meant nothing if you achieved it alone. That the floors you cleaned, the work you did, the life you built, mattered less than the person you became while doing it. She'd come into Ethan's apartment that first night, desperate and broken, and he'd said, "Before I change my mind," offering reluctant shelter to someone who'd hurt him. He'd had every right to refuse, to leave her to figure things out alone, to let karma balance the scales. But he hadn't. Because that's what people do. They help each other, and in helping and being seen and seeing others, both of them had found something more valuable than any corner office or title or bank account. They'd found themselves. They'd found home. They'd found the truth that had been waiting beneath all the noise and ambition and fear. That we're all just people trying to make it through, and the ones who make it are the ones who remember we're not meant to do it alone. The movie ended. Emily had fallen completely asleep, curled against Clara's side. Ethan gently lifted his daughter, carrying her to bed. Clara heard his soft voice reading a bedtime story, even though Emily was already dreaming. When he returned, he sat back down closer this time. "She loves you, you know. Calls you her bonus mom." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I love her too. I love both of you." "We love you back. That's how this works." It was how it worked. Simple and complicated and utterly transformative. Love that wasn't transactional or conditional or based on utility. Love that just existed because people chose to see each other, to show up, to say come in when it would be easier to close the door. Clara Stratton had risen from the floors she once looked down on, but more importantly, she'd learned that rising didn't mean climbing over people. It meant lifting them with you. It meant remembering that every person cleaning a floor, serving a meal, securing a building, had their own story of sacrifice and strength. It meant building a world where dignity wasn't reserved for those at the top, but was the foundation everything else stood on. She'd learned it from a janitor who'd never stopped being more than his job title, from a daughter who saw the world with uncomplicated clarity, from a community that took care of each other because that's just what people did. And in learning it, she'd finally become someone worth saving, not the CEO, not the powerful executive, not the woman with the corner office, just Clara. Imperfect learning, trying, showing up, being seen and seeing others. It was enough. It was everything. It was grace.